bring children to my neck of the woods. Oh, don't mind the shadows. Don't mind those shadows at all. Tell me something. Do the shadows remind you of a certain pony? Well, let me tell you a story. Is a tyrant truly a tyrant if he does what he must for the sake of his subjects? Is he truly evil if what he does is for the greater good? Only history can be the judge of that. This is the Journal of a Crystal Tyrant. Enjoy.
My name is Sombra, King of the Crystal Empire, and if you are reading this, it means that I have failed, and the horror that awaits my kingdom is nigh. However, before your end, let me tell you why I did what I did, and why they call me a tyrant. It all started when I was a young colt. I had recently acquired my cutie mark, and as is tradition within the Empire, the ponies had gathered around the Crystal Heart to channel their energy into it. At first, I was excited to be the center of all this attention. When the Crystal Heart began to glow, however, I felt that something was amiss. It was small, hardly noticeable to any other pony around, but I felt it. It was small, hardly noticeable to any other pony around, but I felt it. I felt it with every fiber of my being. It was a call, or maybe what I should say, a pulse. I tried to ignore it, but found that even after the ceremony was over, I could still hear it. That is when I decided to go to the library to study the origins of the Crystal Heart. It told me nothing I already didn't know. I decided that it was all in my head, that it was just nerves of having to take over my father's throne soon. That night, I was unable to get any rest. I could still feel the pulsating thrum of the Crystal Heart in my ears. I started to go mad, thinking that I had somehow broke myself under this ever-increasing pressure of having to rule an empire. I closed my eyes, and that is when the sound pricked at my ears. Another pulse, fainter than the one I had heard all day, but it was there. I focused my ears now, focusing on only the sound. Another, and then another, slow but steady. While listening to the sound coming from the Crystal Heart, my own began to sink. There was no doubt in my mind. It was alive. As the days went on, I carefully kept my ears on the heart, while my eyes constantly searched for answers. The pulsating kept to its slow pace, one every beat every 2 hours. I scanned through every book within the Empire's vast collection of knowledge, only to come up empty-hoofed. I had given up hope as to find out what the crystal heart really was. That was when I found something that could help. It was nothing more than a simple spell book. Most unicorns would only read through it only to expand their knowledge of the more common spells. However, the spell that my eyes fell upon was one of intriguing implications. Most ponies would never even bother with it, but I was a king, and all knowledge is power. That night I snuck my way into the heart. I lit my horn and began my spell. It was nothing dangerous, just a simple mind-link spell. I had figured that if I couldn't find what I was looking for within our books, I'd go straight to the source. Oh, how I wish I hadn't. My mind felt as if I was being torn apart. I was nothing, yet I was everything. Years of knowledge lost to time were coursing through me. Just then, when I was at my weakest, it stopped. I opened my eyes, only I wasn't in the Crystal Empire anymore. No, I was in a vast cavern, and what lied before me was something out of a nightmare. A creature, monstrous in size. It was easily the size of a mountain, if not bigger. Teeth longer than most buildings of the Empire protruded out of its formidable maw. Its skin looked as if it had been made of the blackest onyx. I watched in horror as it took a heavy breath, shaking the cavern to the point that stalactites fell from the ceiling, only to shatter upon hitting the beast's skin. When it exhaled, plumes of noxious steam permeated the air. The walls that were in direct fire screamed as water boiled off of them. Its tail, covered in long twisted spikes, twitched, causing deep chasms to be cut into the cavern floor. I was at a loss of words. I had never seen such a creature in all my life. Not even in books. It was by no means a dragon, nor was it akin to the beasts of the sea or air. No, whatever this thing was, it was something else. A monster out of some child's darkest nightmare. A sudden crack of thunder radiated throughout the room. Then another, and another, each one set to an all too familiar rhythm. It was the Crystal Heart. With every thrum, the beast stirred. It was waking up. The Crystal Heart was calling it. Before I could react, I was pulled back to my body, lying there in the courtyard. It was hard to breathe because of the fear coursing through my body. I rushed back to my chambers to formulate a plan. However, the only thing I could come up with was considered heresy, but it was the only thing I could do. So, I was forced to wait for my father to relieve the throne to me. It wasn't a particularly long wait. He was old and decrepit. It was maybe a month before I was told my father had passed. The entire empire mourned their loss. I was forced to hold back my tears that day, the first in many to come. There was too much work to do, too many lives at stake, and unfortunately, not enough time. Within the week, I removed the heart from its altar and hid it away. My subjects were not pleased with that, but I had already steeled my resolve. I knew I couldn't stop the protective magic of the heart. If I did, my subjects would be claimed by the surrounding cold almost immediately. I decided that if I was going to go through with this, then I needed to find a safe place for my ponies. Unfortunately, it was impossible to move an entire population to a new location. Even if it wasn't, my subjects would insist on bringing a heart for protection, which would accomplish nothing. My only move then was to go underground, to turn our mines into a protective sanctuary for them. Once they were safe, I would take the heart to the farthest corner of the world and leave it. Months passed by like minutes as I forced my ponies to excavate the mines. Day after day they dug. Day after day more of them died. They pleaded with me to end this madness, to return the heart to its place. It broke my heart every time they asked, only for me to refuse. It soon came to my attention that rumors were circulating about me, saying that I was grief-ridden, that I was power-hungry. Some even said that I was a demon in disguise of their once proud prince. If it were not for the fact that I knew the truth, I might have agreed with them. One day when I awoke from my slumber, I had heard that several ponies had left our protective walls to try and find help. Their frozen bodies were brought back soon after. Many blamed me for their deaths. I wanted to cry. I wanted to tell them the truth, but I couldn't. How do you tell them that the very thing that they worship is their doom? It wasn't until I reached my chamber that I cried. I could no longer let my subjects see me mourn. I had to be strong. The next morning I forced the tears down my throat as I placed collars around their necks. I hated seeing them chained up like dogs. I hated looking into their eyes, knowing that I was to blame for their suffering, for their fear. However, fear is an excellent motivator, and with time being a precious commodity, I decided to no longer use traditional magic. I knew that if they saw me using dark magic, they would be that much more motivated to stay within my good graces. So, from that moment on, whenever I was out in public, I used dark magic to appear more menacing than what I actually was. I had to. For their sake. If becoming the object of their fears meant a safe place for them to live, then so be it. There were a few incidents of ponies trying to rebel. They would make the same demands, return the heart, and step down. I would simply respond with a quick glare and say no. Some would throw their weapons to the side and beg for mercy, while some would run away or fall on their own blades out of fear. In those moments, I would carry their bodies to the pyres myself. The cries of the widows will forever haunt me. By the time 3 years had passed, we had dug more than 5 miles of tunnels, and unfortunately, the cemetery was almost as big by this time. I had long since stopped my public appearances. I could no longer look at my beloved ponies. How could I, when I was the cause of their misery? There were times in the dead of night, when every pony was asleep, would I sneak to my hiding place of the crystal heart. I would pray that I had been mistaken, that I just messed up the spell. Every time I would look at the heart, I would cast my now perfected spell. Every time I would be transported back to the beast within its den. Every time it would stir more and more. There was no doubt about it. It would be awake very soon. The last time I had done this was the day I was confronted by the princesses of Equestria. They had demanded that I relinquish my hold over the Crystal Empire, that my tyranny was unbalancing the harmony of kingdoms. Ha! Foolish little manners with foolish little comprehension of harmony. I did not care about the other kingdoms. Equestria was in no danger of the beast. They were nowhere near its domain. The Yaks were hardy and could easily move their nation if so called. The Griffins, riddled with their short-sighted goals and greed, they would sooner watch the world burn before they lifted a tongue to help another nation. The Minotaurs lived on a bleeding island. No, this wasn't about harmony. It wasn't. It was about political maneuvering. If they defeated me, they would gain the favor of my beloved subjects. It would force them to forfeit their precious resources. I remember those two foolish princesses in armor on the horizon of the eastern plain. A smart move using the rising sun as a beacon of hope and blinding light. Too bad I wasn't going to send my subjects out to die in a useless battle. I went out to the balcony dressed in full armor, my head held high. I casted my spell. One last time to see if I was wrong. One last bitter attempt to prove myself wrong. If I was, I would surrender and face the headsman's axe. I wasn't. My heart trembled like it always did whenever I looked upon the creature's monstrous visage. This time was especially horrid, for the creature was not only stirring, but its eyes were starting to open. As I released the spell, I saw the princesses drawing ever closer. I knew that if we were to fight, it would surely rise the beast completely. I knew that even should I win, I would only see the beast devour my kingdom in search of the heart. At this point, I only had one option: to cast my empire into ice and shadow. Perhaps if the heart was no longer active in the world, the beast would return to its slumber, and I could tell my ponies the truth. I hoped my citizens would forgive me as I lit my horn. The colors of the gates began to fade soon, followed by the buildings. Then my precious little ponies lost their glow. They lost what made them special. They went to sleep. By the time the princesses reached the gate, my kingdom was evaporating into nothingness. 1,000 years passed like sand through an hourglass. My beloved ponies slept while I kept my vigil over the beast. My plan had worked. It had returned to its slumber, though just barely. If it weren't for the fact that my magic was growing weak, I would have maintained the spell for even longer. Unfortunately, I do have my limits. The spell broke, and the great crystal empire returned from oblivion. My ponies slowly woke from their stupor, but my body became little more than dust. I was forced to turn myself into a specter of smoke in order to protect them. To my surprise, a new alicorn had laid claim to my throne within the span of me dying, and my return. Damn princesses and their meddling! Her magic had forced me out of my kingdom, and only served to stir the beast. I knew that it wouldn't be long before it fully awoke, but now I was presented a golden opportunity to rid my ponies of their demise. If I could breach the barrier, swallow the heart, and run to the farthest corner of the world, I could potentially draw the creature to me and away from my citizens. The new princess would protect them with her magic, and I could finally pay for my crimes. It was a slim hope, but a hope I was willing to die for. I bled for my nation. I watched as proud fathers worked themselves to death in the mines. I held back my tears as mothers buried their children. My heart broke as ponies with whom I had loved and cherished called me a demon. If If the history books deign to call me a demon, so be it. But I let it be said here within these old pages that I loved my ponies. I constantly bombarded the barrier, hoping that a small sliver of a crack would appear in it somewhere. I only needed a crack to get me in. It took several days of prodding, but eventually she faltered, and the barrier weakened for a split second. I rushed the gate only for my horn to be severed off. I used the opportunity to infect the gate with dark magic so I could enter fully into the Empire. It took longer than I had hoped, but I eventually got in. After I entered, I felt one of my alarms being triggered. I had to stop whoever it was. I rushed for the heart. Fools had no idea what they were messing with. I saw a little dragon with a heart. He had the look of my father in his eyes. Caring, but bold. I made haste towards him, only for the Alicorn to beat me to him. My fears came to reality as she placed the crystal heart back onto its pedestal. I cried for them to stop, but they ignored me. The heart which had laid dormant for so long was now being charged with love and hope like it had never been. The barrier that was casted from it not only destroyed me, but it awoke the monstrous beast that had lied dormant for who knows how long. I'm telling you this here within this journal, that the beast is coming. It is coming with a ravenous hunger. It's coming for the crystal heart. It's coming. It is coming.